Welcome to today's Brown Bag Lunch from the ABAA and the Gender Equity Initiative. We're really excited about today's chat because as a rare book dealer, I'm always running into problems for conservation. So today we have Lyudmyla Babadzhanova, and we are really excited. I'm going to start by giving her a little blurb, and then I'm going to hand it over to Luda. So here we go. Luda is a professional book and paper conservator, a conservator, and the founder of Bua Conservation LLC, a private conservation studio dedicated to the care and preservation of rare books, manuscripts, and archival materials. With over a decade of experience in the field, her work supports libraries, collectors, and cultural institutions in maintaining the integrity and longevity of their holdings. Thanks so much, Luda, for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me, Lizzie. I will share my screen right now.
Yay.
Hopefully this works. There you go.
Beautiful. I'll take myself off of here and let you go on.
Um, what not to do in book and paper conservation. My name is full name Lyudmyla Babadzhanova. I have studied art conservation, specifically library and archives conservation at Buffalo State University, SUNY. For 3 years, and that was a while ago. I bring, like said earlier, 10 plus years of experience to the field and a blend of scientific research and art history methodology into the work. Often I work with libraries, collectors, and cultural institutions to preserve and protect their collections. I provide conservation treatments, condition assessments, and preventive care. And all my practices align with the AIC Code of Ethics. I've become a professional associate level AIC member and been peer reviewed in my work. Give a brief overview. I hope to give examples of what not to do in preventive conservation or preventive preservation of items. Some treatments can be completely irreversible and difficult for conservators to work with. I'll mention some environmental hazards that can damage books and papers, and also the damaging DIY fixes that we often come across. There are 10 agents of deterioration that we recognize in cultural heritage preservation. It could be anything from physical force, vandalism, fire, water, which is a common one, pests, very common, poor temperature, humidity controls, neglect from even dust accumulation, pollutants, and light, be it UV light or even visible light. One of the common issues we can come across on books specifically is use of oils or conditioners on leather. Often it makes leather become brittle, tough, and fail at the hinges of the spine, and then almost impossible to work with. And having that type of issue is often difficult to reverse in any way. Leather is very susceptible to damage, to moisture, and usually the use of leather conditioners is not recommended. I wanted to go over some of that was what not to do, but there are common book coatings, leather book coatings that are used in conservation that I thought would be one suggestion I could give as a conservator that could be used. by collectors is SC6000 leather conditioner. It's usually applied locally over every pair, but not over the leather. It consolidates the paper fibers and makes things smoother and less likely to further damage the repaired area. Cellugel is the same, is a leather consolidant. It was developed to work against the leather red rot, which is often seen in vegetable tanned leather, when the leather is so degraded that it becomes really powdery. And we often use Cellugel. It's mixed with an alcohol to consolidate the leather, reduce the amount of powder that's being given off when handling the book, and helps to prolong its life a little bit. You can apply it in several coatings and let each one dry as you apply. And Klucel G at 2% is basically the same thing. If you didn't want to buy the Cellugel, you can buy the powder and mix it in ethanol and use it in the same way for red rot consolidation. Often we see a lot of damage in oversized books. Oversized books tend to be really heavy. By laying them flat, it can reduce a lot of the damage on the spine, tearing of the boards, the text block tearing off, the sewing tearing. It could just be a lifesaver for the book. And even if it's inside a box, it's often best practice to lay it flat on the shelf. Displaying books is you have to consider the sensitivity of the paper you're using. Papers later, or more modern papers are very sensitive to light due to the high content of lignant wood pulp in them. And the wood pulp makes it degrade a lot, the degradation a lot faster. Often it's not advisable to put books out on display. The edges will start to yellow, and that's completely irreversible. Visible light, even though we say plexi or glass is coated with protection against UV light, it will not protect the books or the paper from from visible light. Visible light, the only way to protect something from visible light, daylight, is or even light coming from artificial source like a light bulb is really keeping it in the dark. So as long as you can keep an item in the dark is best, especially if there's any color involved. The color will start to fade eventually over time, even with UV blocking coatings. Books on permanent display are often at risk of damage of cumulative light exposure. You can rotate those books, but they still will accumulate the exposure time. The other environmental issues often can be any pollutants, like we had in New York, we had lately the fire, smog, really poor air quality, that all can have an effect on collection items as well. Having a book open on display strains the binding and the sewing, and it's often, if recommended, it's would rotate the area that it's displayed on every 3 months. And the lighting should be at very low levels. Mylar dust jackets, very recommended to put on books. They can help books from accumulating dust and from handling or mishandling, a lot of times very useful. University of Delaware, as a side note, discovered there are some books that with the green covers contain arsenic in the cover, in the colorant used on the book cloth. And one of the ways to deal with it currently is to put a Mylar dust jacket on the book and wash your hands after use. Um, Do not attempt to do major repairs on your own. Paper and leather are susceptible to tide lines, and those are the dirt lines that appear after you applied water to paper or leather. They're very difficult to reduce in appearance once they appear, and often even after you try to reduce them in appearance, are still visible under UV light. Leather darkens in presence of water. Attempting any kind of leather repair can cause a lot more harm. And the discoloration to black is completely irreversible. And do not apply any repair materials on the leather, including any kinds of labels. We often come across that happens a lot in libraries, and we can't, if we could try to remove them, but the solvents used can often cause more damage in the long run. So we don't recommend it. Labeling with tags and slips of paper is the best practice. Tape is the biggest nemesis, excuse me. Any type of tape will damage over a period of time. The damage is difficult to remove. In my experience, you have to be extremely aggressive in the treatment once the tape is there, and sometimes due to the materials present, the inks, it's often impossible to do the aggressive treatment because then other materials are sensitive to the treatments needed. And we can only just stabilize the materials, the paper, the uh, whatnot, and not actually remove the staining. The stains also, what the stains are, the paper will become extremely brittle. Over time, the tackiness might dry out, but the staining will keep degrading that spot. The inks also in the area become very sensitive and tend to, especially in iron gall ink, will degrade faster. Head caps. Often we see a lot of head caps being pulled on and being pulled completely off. There's loss of end bands. The sewing structure becomes completely compromised, and we have to either completely rebuild it or part of or whatever the collector or owner of the item wants. But if can be avoided, don't pull on the head cap to get the book out of the shelf. Instead, the best practice is pulling the book out in the middle, where you're tugging at the whole book, not just at one spot. And that could be extremely useful practice, just treating your own collections this way. Works on paper. Beware works mounted to a board. Check for hinges before attempting to lift them. If acquiring any item that's attached to anything, just don't tug at it right away. Rolled documents, I been through a lot where someone tries to unroll the document to see what's inside, and often the person ends up tearing it down the middle, and the tear is extremely visible. Paper is usually brittle and it causes a lot of damage to the item. Rolled documents can be often humidified, flattened safely by a professional. Um, you have to consider the inks that could possibly be there, so the humidification often is gentle and slow. Um, and if you do end up having to roll an item, or that's the only way to store something, there are ways to roll it in a safe way where you can use archival storage tubes to roll the item around the tube, and that prevents it from being rolled too tightly and controls the just controls it from damage. Book supports. If trying to see a book and opening it at too wide of an angle, breaking the spine, and the book ends up having the preferential opening because the spine is broken, the adhesive on the spine broke, uh, and the sewing breaks. I've seen it in uh, large family Bibles, even encyclopedias, dictionaries. A lot of oversized used items often have that issue. And prolonged open display of books will cause the covers to warp if not properly displayed on a proper cradle or support. Um, and then the warping of the cover causes the sewing to break, and then a lot of issues come up. I've seen it done on parchment covered books and on leather covered books. Uh, Covers can often be flattened, however, they will prefer to always open back to or to come back to its warped shape. They will forever have to be stored inside a box that's snug, tightly fit, and that will prevent it from warping again. Um, This is my basic overview of what not to do in preventive conservation, what we aim not, and what we share with our colleagues, and archives and digitization and libraries, museums. We speak to staff all the time about preventive conservation, preventive preservation of items, and sometimes if nothing can be done, the best practice is putting the item inside a box that's well fitted will be very helpful. And I'm open to questions.
Hi. Okay. Thank you so much, Luda. Our first question is from Susanna Horam. Is Hewitt's leather dressing okay to use?
I've seen it in the labs too, but I wouldn't use it on. I'm always very hesitant to use any type of leather dressings.
Is there a specific ingredient that we should be looking to avoid when we get these products?
Ingredient wise, they haven't really been tested enough to honestly say,
Okay.
especially in conservation, unless somebody goes and does a research on it. Even Hewitt's leather dressing, I know no one uses it in conservation. Sometimes I see it in labs, but I have never seen anyone actually use it.
Yeah, I was horrified when you said that, and I thought, oh God. Um, the
It,
next from Howard Rutenberg, any way we can fix vellum covers that are bowed outwards?
those require humidification, very slow, very time consuming. Usually takes at least a whole day to flatten the covers. I have experience with it. Um, just to do it on your own, it's not a quick fix. It'll take at least a day to humidify and work the cover, and then another week of just drying and making sure the cover flattens
Hmm.
properly. And sometimes you might even have to repeat the process.
Over
Uh,
and over again?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Alexander Aiken is asking about musty odors. He comes across musty books and says it seems that most popular treatments only cover up the problem. Is there anything we can do ourselves to treat musty items?
I've done research on paper where I have looked inside the paper using SEM microscope, which is extremely high magnification. And once that basically means there's mold and mold spores inside the paper. Paper's been exposed to it, and there's really very little you can do to take it back.
So
Uh,
heat, like I've heard, like in the past, they say like to heat it up to a certain thing to kill it. That doesn't really kill it.
no, it's
Yeah.
there. Once it's there, it's there. It's, I would say having circulating air will help a lot. Having even an air purifier while you're doing that will
Hmm.
help a lot to remove the odor. You can fan the books out and have gentle air circulating while you have them fanned out. Um, Often when labs deal with flooding of any kind, where collections get wet, we fan books out to get them as dry as possible, as quickly as possible. And I would even, to get rid of odor, I would fan it out carefully if the binding allows as much as possible, and just let gentle air circulate with a fan, very gentle, nothing strong.
I have visual of that. Thank you. Kurt Zimmerman's asking, is putting a Mylar cover on leather book okay?
Yes, I've again, you have to then still be mindful of the collection. How are your humidity temperature controls? Um, if it gets too humid, maybe don't do it if it's too humid where you are. You can then use a box instead of a Mylar jacket, because Mylar does tend to create a little microclimate if you're not in a good temperature humidity control. Um, but you can also make a 4-flap enclosure with a 20-point board, and places like Talus and uh, Hollinger and there's so many places. They all sell 20-point, 40-point board you can use to make a 4-flap enclosure, and it'll protect the book just as well on the
Then
shelf.
as Mylar. Okay, great. Michael Watson's asking, is humidification the technique to flatten waving and puckering in old vellum or parchment bindings?
It's one way, but again, it needs to be properly stretched out and properly done. There's a way to do it where you don't want too much moisture introduced to the parchment because it will damage the parchment. So it has to be done in a very controlled manner using specific materials that don't allow moisture directly touching the parchment, the vellum. Um, Very few people even attempt to do it usually.
Hmm.
They're trained conservators. I've trained with one conservator to do that.
Hmm.
Spe- I was always really interested in parchment, and I have successfully humidified and flattened parchment charters and parchment on boards, and but it has to be done carefully, otherwise you can damage the parchment very fast, very easy.
Okay, and his follow-up question is, with inexpensive books, I occasionally use archival mending tape on hinges. Are there damaging aspects to this?
I'm not sure what the tape is, so we'll find out. Unless I'm not sure. Sometimes the word archival is being used loosely because there's absolutely no one controlling the word and what it means. And as conservators, unless you know you used wheat starch paste or some controlled substance that you applied on your own and you made on your own, you don't really know what's in that archival tape. If I come across it, I'll test it with moisture or heat or whatever solvent needed to take it off, but I wouldn't know until I try. So if it
What you're saying, you figure sometimes you have it and you go back and try to see if it actually doesn't do something to the paper before you actually use it, or
we don't use archival tape, we just
okay,
use wheat starch paste, Japanese paper, and if we want to, we can create a remoistenable tissue, Japanese paper on our own, and it can be then applied quickly on items that require like fast processing, fast conservation.
mending kind of thing.
But
Yeah.
archival tape, it's hard to tell. I don't know what's in it.
It
Uh,
reminds me of like in the food world, it's like people say natural, organic, and
but,
right, but
who
it's the
knows it?
same. Okay, great. Uh, Lindsay Witt is asking, what if your institution has a lot of oversized books that need flat storage, but not enough space to do so for every single one? What is your suggestion?
So you could make boxes or enclosures that support the text block. If there is a big gap between the text block and the boards, once it's upright, um, it'll probably be more time consuming, but you can create support so that way the text block's not sagging down.
Oh,
And
so it's holding it underneath the between the two boards and the
yeah,
text block?
a lot of times, yeah, these oversized books have a really wide edge that comes out.
Mm,
The you can create additional support even using something like Velara or Ethafoam. Ethafoam is a little harsh, but Velara, or just build up some blue board, archival blue board from like Tallis, Hollinger, or Gaylord, or
mhm. And you just sit that on top of that?
yeah. Or if you have a box, include it in the
Mhm.
box, inside the box.
Okay,
I would then put them inside boxes with that additional support.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Natasha Baldassare is asking, how do preservation techniques change with very small miniature books?
Um, it's definitely a challenge. I've had to work on the miniature book, and you just get a little more creative with the materials you use and how you use them. Storage wise, if put it inside a box, I've made boxes completely oversized so they're not lost inside the collection. So the book may have been like about 2 inches by like three tops. I don't know, maybe less. It was a really small book, very small. And I made the box probably, it was at least 10 inches high, and it was the right, almost the right thickness. It was a little thicker than the book too, but it was a very big box, and inside there was a small opening just for that book that you could take out. And everyone was happy because now that book was visible and it wouldn't get lost and damaged while on the shelf.
Okay. Marge Sauls is asking, do you have any recommendations for materials already affected by vinegar syndrome? Maybe you can explain to us what vinegar syndrome is.
So vinegar syndrome usually comes off of collections that are from microfilm collections. So I'm assuming those books were inside the same storage that microfilm was stored, or some kind of film. Any film has that. It's acetic film that was made with acetate in it. Not all film has that issue, the vinegar smell. Um, we actually, one of the collections I work with, we just had that problem. Again, the smell is really difficult to get rid of. You can put baking soda near the collections. It can help neutralize the smell. Even black carbon around too to help with the smell, to absorb the smell. I would again try to maybe like fan the book out, have a ionizing air uh, fan working with a purification system in it, and it will probably take a lot of time to get rid of it. And maybe daily, just fan it out during the day, let it go through that next day, and do that maybe for a month. I wouldn't even know how long it would take. Uh,
Okay. Um,
so usually also the baking soda will help a lot, and black carbon to have that out. You could buy the bags of it and just maybe like trays of it, have it out to absorb the odor. Um, that helps a lot.
okay. Dan Friedis is asking, are there conservation labs that will fumigate books to kill mold spores, perhaps with ethylene oxide?
No, but if we have collections exposed to mold on large scale, we often uh go outsource the damage to other places that are equipped to deal with large mold damages. It's you then have to wear HEPA filter masks, use HEPA filter vacuums. Um, you saw one of the images. I was wearing a mask and goggles. I was dealing with a mold outbreak that was inside the vent system that they discovered. And we were going through all the books and getting them out and off the shelf and wiping everything down. But that collection was going to be sent out outside vendor to deal with the outside vendors who were going to clean them. And clean them, you can you vacuum and use brushes to gently go over and vacuum every inch of the book. You can go through each page, gently brush and vacuum into the vacuum, but that vacuum and the tools should be specifically dedicated only to mold use after that. And you should be wearing HEPA filter everything. Cover gloves, nitrile gloves, not cotton gloves.
Oh, okay, not cotton gloves, right.
Cotton gloves will not protect you from it.
Okay. I like the idea of your own vacuum system.
They sell the HEPA filter vacuums but they're very expensive to
Mhm.
buy. Even for institutions, it's sometimes rare for them to have a HEPA filter vacuum. That's why they tend to outsource the mold outbreaks. Um, Also, items can be, if it's the kind of mold that's active mold, so black mold that's smudges, you clearly see it's still active, the paper's still damp. It can be flash frozen or kept in the freezer until it's ready to be treated by an outside vendor.
Hmm. Okay. Peter Roque is asking, is wheat starch paste always preferable to PVA?
Yes, it's wheat starch paste is reversible. PVA is not reversible. There are instances that people use PVA, but that means that you're planning to keep that there forever. And usually, if I use PVA, it's because I made my own book and it's my own private book. But to do a treatment, we don't use PVA. The only time I've used is if I laminate two pieces of Japanese paper to with PVA to make it more resilient, and oftentimes in conservation we could use it as a substitute for parchment to use in parchment repair. It's very
Okay,
it's then applied with an adhesive that's reversible to the parchment.
got it.
One of them is Lasco. It's reversible with the solvents instead of water.
Got it. Okay. We have a dissenting we have a dissenting decision here. Jillian Goldberg says, "Do not use non-HEPA filter vacuum on mold. It will spread the spores around your space." That sounds like a nightmare.
You need a HEPA filter vacuum. It's yeah, it's mold can be extremely dangerous. Also, once it gets in your body, it's well, I don't even think it's possible to get rid of it. You basically kind of stuck with it. So you really should minimize the exposure time to active mold.
Okay, so nobody go and use your everyday vacuum
Yeah, you don't want to.
on your books. And also, I want to remind everybody, all the all the ABA members attending, that Luda will offer discounts on her service for ABA members. And specific details are in the membership portal. So, yay, yay. I'm sure you're getting a lot of calls after this. What's the worst collection you've ever had to deal with? What's the worst catastrophe you've ever had to deal with?
Well, that mold outbreak in one of the collections I worked with was pretty scary considering it took so long to notice and that there were people working in those spaces
Oh,
and it was airborne in events.
so
Um,
it came from an outside source?
it was inside the vents and
Oh,
air was coming out. Um,
and
that
it
was like
had,
silent killer kind of
wow.
felt like I felt bad. It, it wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, and have you heard anything about the outcome of what's happened out in California with, some instances, there have been some real damaging after those fires.
Yeah.
Um,
I do have a lot of colleagues out there. I know collection spaces are okay because I haven't heard anything from collection spaces. I'm assuming no news is good news.
yeah, I
Uh,
think it was more some private collectors who really were hit hard.
and I know a lot of times conservation does a lot of public outreach towards that, so I'm
Hmm.
assuming that they're doing that. Right now, well, it's this past weekend it finished. AIC had their meeting, American Institute for Conservation. Um, forget which city it was in this year, but they probably will sp or spoke a lot about the fire damage there and places that got affected probably were mentioned during that meeting. Um, Usually what you can do is, I mean, fire, it burns. If it touches your collection, it's really nothing you can bring back. If you have smoke damage or odor control, even I know the vinegar smell, but vinegar is also good with the getting rid of that fire smoky smell. You can leave some out next to it and it'll absorb it. Um,
Okay.
Again, use a fan. If it's moisture damage, use a fan. You can winter time, I've seen people have condensation form in air vents and start leaking, or in creating little microclimates behind the books against the wall. Use a fan to circulate air in small spaces, especially if it's creating these little microclimates everywhere.
Mm.
It A fan can do a lot of help. It sounds simple, but it can go a long way to control and prevent a lot of problems.
Okay, and before we end up, do you have any favorite websites or any like places that you go to, or you maybe you don't have to go to, but you would suggest for the, the not the general public, but people who are interested in this to get more information?
Yeah, AIC is always working on the AIC Wiki, WIKI, and AIC Wiki tries to update the information that's available there. Of course, it's meant to be used with a grain of salt, like it is updated and kept up by professionals, but the information is meant for professionals, so be careful trying to use it on your own. A lot of consideration goes into treating items, the inks, the paper, how it's going to respond, when was it printed, what year, what date, a lot. A lot of damage can occur if you're not aware of
Right.
certain. Yeah.
Any
I've
books that you suggest or oh,
In the AIC wiki is very up to date. I would use
mhm.
It's very useful from objects to paintings, book and paper, parchment. Um, Again, use it, but be mindful. I know uh, there's a very good source of information, but also if you don't know how to use it and approach it, it could be a problem.
Right. That's why we go to professionals like you. Somebody else Jillian put up a
And
website resources, so everybody could go to that if they need to. Well, really, thank you. So if anybody has any more questions, please
there's
put them up
another
now.
CCH, or CC Conservation Center. Yeah, NEDCC is great. They're very, very helpful too. I know small institutions also reach out to them because they're good with large scale operations as well. Um,
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was really helpful. And thank you everybody for coming in for your brown bag lunch this month. And if anybody has any ideas for upcoming brown bag lunches, please get in touch with us at ABAA headquarters. And we'll see you next month.